Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Electric word, life, it means forever, and that's a mighty long time. But I'm here to tell you, there's something else. Oh, come on, you left me hanging. We gotta go crazy. I have always wanted to do that. David is just imbibing me, see. For real, dearly beloved. We have gathered here today in this beautiful sanctuary of hope, in this sanctuary of memory, in order to remember, to consider, and to reconsider our commitments. Our commitments to this church, our commitments to something greater than all of us, our commitments to God. And so we gather here on this beautiful, beautiful morning to consider God and marriage. This is the third Sunday in a series. The first Sunday was God, the Journey, where Marlon talked about our relationship to God and how that relationship is a journey. It is a never-ending journey. And then last week, Marlon talked about God, the funeral, how it is that we respond when it feels as though God has died or God has turned from us. This Sunday, we're looking at God, the marriage, in which we're going to explore what our roles and responsibilities are in our long-term relationship with something higher than us. And then next week, Bishop Pearson is going to be here, and he's going to be exploring God, the birth, and how we are born again and again and again with God. So I hope you'll come back for that as well. Now, marriage itself has somewhat lost its meaning in our culture. If you look around at examples of marriage that are fed back to us in the culture, there's a whole lot of fairy tales, whole lot of ideas that relationships, long-term relationships, just happen. But they are a lot of work. A lot of work. If you look at... Y'all can help me up here now. That's all right. The other thing, when we look at marriages, we can also look at the ceremony itself, and it's kind of lost its meaning too. We've been in this battleground about the definition of marriage, on who owns it. Is it the state or is it the church? And who gets married, who can get married, who should get married, who shouldn't get married, who's getting divorced. That's in the news too, right, all the time. But with the ceremony itself, the ceremony has somewhat lost some of its meaning too. When you can get married underwater or jumping out of an airplane, when you can get married on Skype, don't even have to be in the same room. Probably soon we're going to be able to get married on our iPhones. Do you? I do, yes. You can get married in a car in a drive-thru in Las Vegas, right? But those kinds of ceremonies, they don't ring true for me. See, I need a ceremony that reflects what I am expecting to see in the marriage itself. A ceremony that handles in some way the complexities of both the people who are joining together in this relationship and the difficulties of being in a relationship. And so I want to tell you that relationships are hard. Marriage is hard. It is hard work. There's this story I want to share with you about a woman. She just moved in with her husband into their brand new home. And she moved in and took a shoebox and put it up on the top shelf in her closet, and she told her husband, "Don't touch that box." Right. Right. Well, evidently they were stronger than y'all, because he didn't touch that box. For 50 years, this man left that box alone. But after they'd been married for 50 years, her health started to fail. And he was putting all of their affairs in order, and he found this dusty box up in the top part of their closet. And inside that box, he pulled it down and said, "I'm going to have to open this because, it's been a long time, and I'm afraid I won't know what's in here." So he opens up the box, and inside that box are 2 doilies. You know what a doily is? All right, 2 doilies. Lace, knit together, right? Don't ruin the table. Put your glass on it, right? 2 doilies, and $86,500. And so he took that box to her in the hospital, and he said, honey, I found this box. That box you didn't want me to touch? Well, I touched it, and here's what's in it. This is what I found. And she says, oh, yeah, when I got married, when we first got married, my mother gave me that box. And me that every single time I got mad at you, that I should put all that energy into making a doily. And he was touched. He was on the verge of tears because there were just 2 doilies in that box, and they had been married for 50 years. 50 years. So he said, honey, I am so amazed, and I'm feeling so connected to you right now, but what about the money? And she said, oh, that's the money that I made for the other doilies. Selling those other doilies. Uh-huh. That's right. See, marriage is hard work. It is hard work. I have this friend from Texas. He says things rather simply like those delightful people from Texas often do. And he'd been married for 60 years. And I said, what is the secret to your relationship? I'm getting ready to preach on marriage, and I wonder what is the secret to why you have been married so long, 60 years. He said, well, the reason why we've been married for 60 years is because we never broke up. And in a sense, that's true, right? I mean, it's the simplest advice. How do you stay married? You don't get divorced. That's right. But marriage is hard work. And so I'm telling you, there's some tools that we can learn in order to do better at this. And I'm going to be teaching some classes here at the church. One at the end of January on a Sunday morning from 9 to 11:30. It's for couples. It's called a relationship toolkit. Tune-up. And what we're going to do is I'm going to have you sign up in advance because you're going to take an online assessment separately and answer a bunch of questions about different areas in your relationship. Where you think your strengths are, where you think you need some growth. And be honest in that assessment, there can be some real opportunity to strengthen your relationship. And so I'm going to take that workshop and create it out of individual couples' answers, responses to that assessment. And so we will talk about the specific tools that are relevant to all of those couples in that workshop. And then I will meet with the couples individually if they want some more feedback on their individual assessment. So it's called a relationship tune-up. You can sign up for church office. I'm also going to do a class in March called Fighting Fairly. Because if you're going to last, you got to learn how to fight fairly. Fighting fairly has a lot of different implications, but we're going to look specifically at what it means to always come to one another in communication and in conflict, assuming that you are on the same team. You're both wearing the same colored jerseys, right? I'm going to give you some tools. There are tools, and if we look at our relationship in a way in which we always are discovering something new, how can we do this better? It changes the way we look at our relationship. It deepens our commitment to the person who's most special to us. One of the things that I often talk to couples about when I do marital counseling is the stranger standard. The stranger standard is one that, are you treating your significant other where you would treat a stranger on the street? Think about that. It's probably true. I mean, I do it. I'm guilty of it. So if you had a guest in your home and you were watching TV, would you not say, can I get you something to drink? I'm gonna go in the other room. Would you like something to drink? We don't talk to our spouses like that, do we? Maybe some of you do. You're better than I if that is the case. Or just picking up after yourself because it's not your home. If you were a guest in someone else, wouldn't you clean up after yourself a little bit more than you do in your own home? So we talk about the stranger standard as a standard to lift up and look at our own behavior, to look at how it is that we are in relationship with the person that we claim is the most important to us. Now, when we do a ceremony here at All Souls, after all that premarital counseling where we've talked about all the important areas of a relationship, it's important to me to have that ceremony reflect the complexities of the relationship, to reflect the fact it is not just A Vision of Love, Mariah Carey, Greatest Gift of All, Whitney Houston, understanding of love. That's not what marriage is. It is hard work. And the ceremony needs to show that. So in our ceremonies, we do this thing. We don't have to do this, but I do this because I like to do it. And it's called a hand fasting. This is one of those things that might replace a unity candle or jumping the broom. Yeah. Some of y'all have jumped a broom? You jumped a broom? No, you're looking at me like I'm crazy. Okay, yeah, see, there you go. Different kinds of experiences, of rituals that you can add to a ceremony. Breaking a glass, sharing wine, doing a unity candle. But this is called a hand fasting. And what happens is that in the ceremony itself, at the time of the vows, we invite the couple up onto the chancel because it is on this space where they exchange vows and they exchange rings, they exchange all their promises. So we have now done all that vision of love, gooey, sappy. You've been to those weddings. Maybe you had one of those weddings. You know what I mean? Where everything is so cute. Right. We've done all the cute things. And then they come up onto the chancel, and in the middle of their wedding, I ask them some real hard, practical questions. I start and have them turn and face one another, and they're holding hands on the chancel. And I take the first chord, and I turn to one of them and say, "Will you anger her?" Right in the middle of their wedding. Will you anger her? Now, they have been coached to answer this question, "I may." But if they've been together long enough, they probably say, "I will. I have. I'm going to keep on doing it. Yes." And the next part of that question is that your intent? No. And I turn to the other person and say, "Will you anger him or her? Is that your intent? No." And then I take the cord and drape it across their hands and move on to the next question. "Will you hurt her?" Yes. Maybe. I may. Likely. I already have. You'd be surprised what they answer in the moment. Is that your intent? No. And the other person, the same question. And this goes on until 6 questions have been asked, and they are grounded in the practical questions of what it means to commit in a long-term relationship. We have named them. We have burst that love bubble. Even though we have named their aspirations, we have also named the complexities of the relationship. And that's important to me, to make it more real. And then after they've answered those questions, I take those cords, tie them loosely around their hands, and tie their knot. That's where this comes from, in hand fasting. I tie their knot. And I say to them, this knot has not been formed by these cords alone. It is made by the promises that you have made here today, in front of these people, in front of this network of people who will hold you accountable to it. And I hold it up and say, you hold in your hands and every moment the making or breaking of this union. Because we have a job to do on our side, each one of us in a long-term relationship. So you can see that marriage is like religion. And I say this too in our ceremonies. It is the giving away of some small part of ourselves so that we can become something greater, so that we can become more than we are. Marriage is hard work. And when we bind ourselves together with someone else, we are giving away some of our freedom so that we can, in fact, become freer. So marriage is like religion, and church is like marriage. Because there are other times when you might step up onto this chancel and put your name in our book of names when you decide to join this church, symbolizing that your whole self, you are committing your whole self to this church. Now, what does that mean? How are you binding yourself to this church? It means that you bring your gifts with you, that you show up, that you do the hard work, That you assume good intentions, similarly to what we would do in our personal relationships. We try to assume good intentions of the people here in this church. So church is also like marriage. Now, what's an instance we considered that our relationship to God is also like a marriage? If we consider that we have responsibilities on our side of the relationship, what might those responsibilities be? Or maybe I should ask you, are you done dating and ready to get married to God? Are you done dating and ready to get married? Somebody told me once that marriage is like going to a restaurant, because when you order something and then you see what somebody else has ordered, you want that instead. Ready to get married to God, to get married to the concept, to the idea of hope, of life, that there is something larger than ourselves. So what would it take? What kind of a ceremony would it take for you to get real about your vows to that something that is larger than yourself? Because you know what doesn't cut it for me? Those sappy ceremonies about God, where God's this idea of something in the sky, kind of like Santa Claus, and that doesn't do it for me. So what kinds of questions would you bind yourself to God with? It's a big question. I'm going to invite you to take your hands and place them on your lap if you don't mind. Don't worry. You can trust me. Palms facing up. And I want you to think for just a second about what do I need to get real about in my relationship with God in order to feel like I can fully commit? Maybe it's, will God hurt me? He may. She may. Life may. Is that God's intent? What's the answer to that question? No. Not a God that I believe in. Will you believe in this church? Yes. Will you be hurt by those in this church? Possibly. Will you be hurt by God? Possibly. Is that God's intent? No. Will you celebrate God's successes? Will you celebrate life's successes? Yes. Will God celebrate yours? Yes. And will this church celebrate yours? Yes, it will. Yes, indeed it will, because we believe that each and every person who is a member of this church has a gift to offer the world and is a valuable part of this greater whole. And so another binding is made. This last question, which I also ask my couples, is, will you believe in her? I turn to one person and say, will you believe in her? And what I mean by that is, will you assume her good intentions as her identity unfolds, as she continues to grow? Will you believe in her? Yes. Will you believe in him? Yes. So imagine in this relationship to God, in this vow renewal to God, can you believe that God believes in you in that way? That God is committed to you as your life unfolds, assumes your good intentions, forgives you when there is conflict? Yes. Yes. So can you believe in this church? In those here? And can you believe in something greater than all of us? Yes. And then I take the cords and I tie them together, and I remind you that you hold in your hands the making or the breaking each and every moment. You hold in your hands the making or breaking of this union. And so we are bound. We are bound to our significant others. We are bound to this church. Religare, religion, right? Religion means religare, to bind oneself to. And so we are bound to one another. We are bound to God. Not in this vision of love way, but in a way that is real. Because in sickness and in health, I am bound. When life is good and when life is not so good, I am bound. When there is money in my pocket and when there is no money in my pocket, I am bound. Bound to hope, right? Bound to believing in something greater than all of us. I am bound. I am bound to each and every one of you. We are bound to each other. Let us be grateful and say hallelujah and amen.